All right, so this video is going to be on how I make this icebox here. And if you're a member of my Patreon, then you've got this icebox file for free. And if you happen to buy this, you're not a member of my Patreon, and you buy the file on Etsy, then this video is for you also. I want to start out by saying that this one that I'm making here is the first one. It's the sort of a prototype. It's me having everything about 95% correct in the computer and then printing it out and going to assemble it and put it together. Then after this, whatever little kinks or whatever I need to adjust have been adjusted by the time you get the files. So that being said, these magnets, okay, measure twice, cut once. So these say they're 3mm by 1mm deep, but they're actually a little bit bigger, and that was my error for not actually going ahead and measuring them before I modeled the holes into the into the model in the software. But one thing I did here is I just went ahead and just widened the hole a bit and deepened it up a little bit, because when you want this door to shut, those magnets need to be flush inside the model so that the door pulls all the way to the cabinet body. Another adjustment that I made, one other thing I did is instead of having two magnets on the cabinet and then two magnets on the door itself, I went ahead and just kept one magnet on the cabinet and one magnet on the door. This way, when they snap together, there's only two magnets that need to click together, that need to join up and mate together. So it just works better. 4 magnets is just overkill. I mean, we're not really trying to keep something cold in here. So anyway, I did make that change, and that's part of what this prototype sort of first print is for me. At any rate, it's a chance for me to see what really works, because it's one thing in the computer when I'm making this stuff and printing it. It's one thing to say, okay, this works and this looks good and I think this is a good idea, but then when I get it out and I start to print it and actually begin to assemble this stuff, what I thought was a good idea in the computer doesn't really continue to be a good idea in real life. And so this prototype sort of step helps me iron out all the little kinks and everything before I actually sell the files, give the files away free, or actually sell the finished painted props. And so it's sort of a time where I can make sure that everything is going to, work like it should. And so I decided that one magnet hole on the door and on the cabinet body was all that was necessary. So that being said, this is if you like breathing resin dust, then the Dremel is the way to go. But these magnets need to set flush in there, and I'll link the magnets in the description of the video. And if you're on my Patreon, it'll be in the Patreon also. These are great magnets. They're so strong. So now that we've got that situated, the holes are big enough for the magnets. We'll use something non-metal to slide them into position, and I just use a little bit of crazy glue here. That's all it takes. Just a little tiny drop on the back side. You don't want to put too much crazy glue in here, because then what's going to happen? It's a shallow hole anyway, but if you put too much, you just want to put it on a pin or something and then transfer it into the hole, because if you put too much, then it's going to run out of the hole and it's going to mess up the paint job on the cabinet. So I just put a little bit like on a piece of, wire or something, and then I transfer that into the hole. It's easier than trying to put the crazy glue bottle tip into the hole and squeeze out just the right amount, because that never works. It gets everywhere. So we masked this off and we painted it. And now I rattle canned the components with the Rust-Oleum 2-in-1 white, flat white, and I use the spray paint on here because it's a really durable finish, and I'm going to be adding lots of alcohol later and stuff to this, and so I need the finish to be durable. I want to wipe it off here though with a damp towel, because this stuff, I work with pigments and all kinds of things, and I want to make sure the cabinet is all the way clean, because I'm going to seal it at this point. Once it's clean and the paint is dry, before I move on to any other part of this, I want to go ahead and put a light coat of aerosol Mod Podge on there. This prevents prevents me from getting anything on there that's going to stain the white. If I happen to get something on my glove and it gets on the model, I can wipe it off with a damp cloth because it's got the Mod Podge aerosol on there to protect it. You know, so we don't damage all the work we've done already, even though we're going to rust it up and stuff. But anyway, so these pins here, these are quilting pins. And I know a lot of people like to use, you know, paper clips and stuff like that. But this needs to be a quilting pin or some stick pin that is straight and strong. You don't want to try to bend and straighten a paper clip and get it to go through the hole of this door, because this hole is very small. It's a very, very narrow hole, and I modeled it for the stick pins to go in here. These quilting pins can be found on Amazon. They're fantastic. I use them for dioramas and all kinds of stuff like this. So we want to trim it down so that it is the right length, so that it doesn't stick out, you know, on the top of the hinge hole or below the hinge hole. It needs to go right inside there, just a little bit shorter than the actual length of the hinge hole, and it's going to rest inside there. And what I like about these stick pins, these quilting pins, is that first of all, they're super straight, but they're super strong because they're metal, and they're super straight. You don't have to bend a paper clip to try to get it in here, you know, and you know, have that just be a headache because it's not, you know, all the way straight. You clip this off with the clippers and slide it in there, and then what I'm doing here is I'm making sure I'm lining up the holes as the pin slides down into there, and I've kind of got my finger on the bottom so it doesn't slide all the way through. It's just going to rest inside there, and then my GoPro for some reason quit working at this point, but you're going to take a little bit of crazy glue and a little bit of baking soda and put a drop on top. What you'll do is you put your drop of crazy glue there, then you take a little tiny sprinkle of baking soda, put it on top, and then you do the same thing on the bottom of the hinge. You're not trying to glue the metal pin in place, you're just trying to seal the hole of the hinge. That's all. And that pin will float around in there. Not float, I mean it's in there nice and tight, but it won't come out the bottom, or it won't come out the top because it's sealed. So that's how the hinge works. That GoPro, I'm almost tired of GoPros. They're just unreliable, it seems like, for me anymore. So at any rate, I posted the picture of the vinyl sticker paper for the inkjet printers. That's one that I use. It's pretty inexpensive. You get a whole bunch of sheets for, you know, not very much money. I create these decals, and I use the Cricut maker to, you know, cut them, because it just does such a great job. It's so quick. I don't have to sit there with a blade and go around each sticker, and then, you know, that would be a nightmare. Thank goodness for the Cricut maker. And when you get the files for free on Patreon, or when you buy the files on Etsy or my website, you get the decal files also. Now, they won't be cut for you if you're buying just the file and doing it yourself, you know, but the stickers will be there included as a template that you can print out yourself and cut yourself and put on there. So I can't send you the stickers themselves. So there's a template, and you'll print it out in your inkjet and put them on there. This is a water slide. Water slide. Oh my gosh, water slide decals are really nice, but they take a special kind of person to put them on. So here's what I use for water slide decals. Now, the thing to remember about the water slide decals is once these print, this is all water-based. The inkjet ink is water-based. You know, these are going to go into water, so you need to seal these up, okay? You'll print these out on that water slide decal paper right through your inkjet printer. Then you'll seal it with an aerosol sealer like Mod Podge. And once that's good and dry, you know, then you're ready to dip these in water. Right here, I'm sort of just dry fitting them and making sure that they're going to fit on the model surface in the space that I have, sort of allotted for them. And they will. I run these through the Cricut Maker also because it cuts. What happens with the water slide decals, if you were to cut these by hand with an X-Acto knife or something, or some scissors, there's going to be this white border, or a not a white border, but it's a see-through border around the letter itself where there's no ink printed on it. And when you put that on the model, you're going to see that shiny sort of excess area that you don't want. So when you do it with the Cricut Maker, there is no excess on there. It cuts it right up to there's a bleed, and it cuts it right up to the edge of the letter. And so it's really nice. Okay, water slide decals. Some tricks that I know is I want to wet my surface first. I don't want it running down, sopping wet, uncontrolled. I just want to brush some moisture onto the cabinet surface. The important thing about the water slide decal is make sure that it's sealed. Spray it with the aerosol Mod Podge. Let it dry, spray it again, give it about 3 coats, because if you don't, when you go to put that water slide decal in the water, you're going to see all that ink start to come up in the water, and your water's going to turn pink or whatever color it is you're going to print these out like. So make sure you don't skip that step. Be generous with the, Mod Podge aerosol. Then these take about a minute and a half. Read the instructions. Every water slide decal is a little bit different on their time. It ranges from a minute to 2 minutes. So, but have you some tweezers, have you a couple brushes on hand, have you a couple little pokey things on hand. You can see I have a variety of tools down here, because once you pull this out of the water, there's no going back. You've got to put it on the cabinet. It will fold over on itself. Don't have your fans on. It will be your enemy. It needs to go right from the water right onto the cabinet. And the reason that I'm wiping the excess water down right here right now is because I don't want anything to bleed. I don't want any ink to run and then go down the cabinet and stain it. So what I do, I got lucky on the eye. The paper fell off in the water, so it was okay. I didn't have to take it off once I put it on the cabinet. But one of the tricks about these is if the cabinet is already moist, which is what I did with that brush, then it gives you the ability to slide the decal around a little bit with the wet brush, and you sort of reposition it a little bit once it's on there in the general position that you want it to be. If you need to fine tune it, since you moisten the cabinet down with some water, you can. There's a little bit of flexibility in there where you can move and fine-tune the water slide decal. I'm going to tell you that, and then I'm going to go to put this C on, and it's going to give me a headache. So here I'm just really taking the paper towel and dipping up any excess water that might be coming down from the letter I. I don't want anything to bleed. I don't want anything running down. I just want a light coat of moisture on the cabinet. So I'm going to pick this up. Oh, and I'm telling you, man, these are stressful. These are stressful, but they look great. I don't want to do these with a vinyl sticker because that's not how it looks in real life. They're not vinyl stickered on there on a nice cabinet. They're, I think they're painted on, but you don't get the same look with a vinyl sticker that you do with the water slide decal. So anyway, once this is going, I see it's going to release from the backing paper easily. I'll pick it up and ruin it. See that? Yes, I ruined it, but I have an extra. Always print extra water slide decals for occasions just like this. Because once you ruin it, you can't like reuse it. It's done, So I have multiples, and how do I know to do that? Because I've ruined plenty of them. That's why. But these, I mean, they're not hard, but they can be. If you don't have a process, they can be a bit of a chore. And so hopefully here I'm helping you out a little bit and giving you some good information on how to be prepared to put these on. Keep the cabinet moist, keep a wet brush on hand, keep a couple dry brushes on hand, small brushes, and You'll see as I do the other side of the cabinet also that I'll make some adjustments, and I'll have to actually lift the decal up a little bit. And I have a tool that I use for the Cricut for stickers, but it works good for this too. So, so you can see I'm going to take the tweezers and I'm just going to touch it. And then with the other tweezers, I'm going to pull the backing paper out from the letter C. So the water slide decal sets on a rigid backing paper, and the water helps it release from that backing paper. So your job here is to take that backing paper and slide it out from the letter, leaving the water slide decal on the cabinet. Sounds really easy, but when you were a kid, did you ever eat, they used to have what's called rice candy, and it's just a little box of candy. It was like 10 cents at the time. You take it out of the box, and it has this wrapper around it, and you put it in your mouth and you eat it, and the wrapper just melts. That's a water slide decal. That's exactly what these things do, man. Don't eat water slide decals, but this is kind of what those do, man. It's, hopefully I can save you a little bit of agony here in putting these on by you seeing, first of all, that you do mess them up. I mess them up. I mean, and I'm going to mess this one up again too, but I fix it. Don't think you're going to, if you've never done these for sure, that you're going to get it right on the very first whack. If you do, hey, make me a video. But it does take some patience, and it does take some not freaking out. As long as they're not dry, you have a little bit of room to work with them a little bit, but the ink starts to come off, it starts to crease up and fold on itself. I feel like I'm doing surgery here. See, I've got a dry brush, and what I'll do is I'll hold that surface with the dry brush, and then I'll slide that backing paper out. But see, it's getting caught on part of the letter itself. So it just ended up, what would have helped me avoid that was sliding it out from the opposite side, but it already started going that way, so I figured I'd run with it, and it just ended up being another headache. But we're getting it. And that's what the little brush is for. There we go. Now that it's there, I've got my wet brush, and I'll just get a little bit more moisture on there and help me move it into place and fix it. And we get her fixed. I mean, well, right there it looks kind of crappy, but we do get it fixed. It looks, we get it back right. But you just can't freak out. And if anything, wipe it off and put another one on. I mean, they're not expensive. It takes, a little bit to print them out. You got to spray and print and spray and stuff like that. But if you print out a sheet of them at a time, then you ain't got to worry about it. If you need another letter, it's right there. So this is where having the cabinet already moist helps, because I'm able to move this around a little bit with a wet brush and a wet cabinet. It there's a little bit of forgiveness in there. So, and if you look at the water, it's still clear. So what that means is none of this stuff is fading or bleeding, that I sealed it well, and we don't have any, sort of the bleed going on here. Because what happens too is that gets on the white, everything gets on this white cabinet body and changes the color of it. So that's the important thing about Mod Podge aerosol, sort of sealing the cabinet up after the paint is dry, before you get onto any of these parts. That way it doesn't, if these do bleed, it doesn't stick to the paint. You can wipe it off with a little bit of water, because it's been protected. How do I know that? Because I've done that before too. I've messed up a lot of stuff. So hopefully you can watch this and avoid some of those pitfalls. And once again, here we're just letting the letter E dry. And I could speed ramp past this and, do it in a fast motion, speed the video up. But I want you to see this part of it in real time, because it is something that, I want you to see how much of a pain in the butt it can be, And believe me, with every letter I go to put on, my heart races. I think, okay, man, it's about time. I need to pick this up. I need to get my plan. I need to get my hands ready. I need to put my brushes in the right spot. I need to make sure that this goes as smoothly as possible. I really do. I get anxious about it, because You know, it's got to be, you know, pretty, you got to have a process, man. These tweezers too, by the way, are super nice. They're actually for the Cricut Maker, and they're like a reverse tweezers. So when you squeeze them, they open, and by default they're closed. So they're really cool, man. I love them for doing stuff like this. They're for vinyl, you know, lettering and stuff like that for the Cricut Maker, but I love them for stuff just like this, man. So once again here, we're going to get this in position. Slide that. Those tweezers are attached to the backing paper, and I'm using the wet brush to hold down the letter. You don't want to hold the letter too hard because it can tear, or it can flake off, the ink can flake off of the decal. So once you get that on there, I begin to notice that my eye is a little, the spacing between my letters is a little off. So I'm like, okay, well, a couple things I can do. I can move the C and the E, or I can move the I. So we're going to start adjusting some of this. And, you know, I kind of go from the edge of the, if you look at the top component of the cooler, I go from that front corner down. That's my center line. I don't want to put, you know, like pencil marks and make all these little marks on the cabinet, because then I have to try to get that stuff off. So I sort of give myself a visual reference as to where my center line is going to be, and I just follow that. Now, I'm good on the vertical center line, but it's the spacing that sometimes I mess up. So here I'm like, well, let's fix this, and I'll show you how I fix it. Being that I keep everything fairly wet, and these stay wet for a little bit of time, I'll go ahead and add a little bit more water to the eye, and then I'll reposition the eye. And believe me, I'm scared right here. This is scary stuff. This is frightening. This is the stuff I can't sleep at night over. This little spatula tool here is super handy for stuff just like this. It's for actually removing stuff off of the, it's another tool for the Cricut Maker, but it's perfect for this because it's a nice little flat blade, flat edge that I can scoot up under there and then pull it down just like I did. And now we're good, man. Anxiety gone. Let your breath out, relax a little bit, and wait, not yet. I got to move it again. There we go. Exhale. Perfect. Leave it alone, man. You're gonna mess it up. That's what always happens to me. I'm like, oh, perfect, man. I got it right where I need it. And then I'm like, oh, you know what? It could go just a little bit this way. Oh, heck, I just ruined it. That's what usually happens to me. But anyway, hopefully this helps you avoid some of the pitfalls of water slide decals. But you will need to decide how you're going to do the decals on your cabinet, because you can do vinyl lettering, or you can, you know, you can do the water slide decals. And hopefully I give you a little information here on how to be a little more comfortable with that. And what I'm doing is I'm using the heat gun here, and all I want to do, you do not want to be close to these with the heat gun. These will shrivel up like a chicharrone and it'll be over. So I don't want them hot. I just want to warm up a little bit of the excess water off of the cabinet, and I'm waiting for that water to drip down, and then I go back in and I wipe it up. And you'll say, well, if you're drying the water with the brush, why do you dip it in the water first? Because I don't want there to be any of the red ink. If it comes down off the sticker or off the water slide decal, I don't want it to remain on the cabinet. So I'll add a little water to bring the brush up against the edge of it. And what that does also is it prevents a drier brush from touching the water slide decal and messing it up. If the brush is a little bit wet and it hits the water slide decal, it's okay. But if it's dry, then it'll ruin the decal. So I'm just sopping up a little bit of the extra water here, using the heat gun, getting up all the excess. And as soon as I see that there's no drips, then I'll be good with this and I can let it dry the rest of the night on its own. But until I see that there's no actual water continuing to come down from the decal, you know, I'll do this. You don't have to, but I do. I don't want to set it up and then come back the next day and look at the water slide decals, and there's streaks of red running down the cabinet that have dried onto it. And, you know, I'd rather go to sleep and know that my water slide decals are going to be fine when I wake up in the morning. My life, right? Who goes to bed thinking about water slide decals? I do. And I do it for you. Right. Oh, man. So we're just... Another thing to keep in mind, when doing the opposite side, make sure you don't let that... So if I have ice on the other side also, but you noticed I had this at an angle while I did it, and it was raised up off of the table. Don't let that other side hit anything. It needs to be raised up and at an angle so that you can keep the opposite side of the cooler off of anything. It can't come in contact with anything, because those stickers that you put on, those water slide decals you put on the other side, when you go to flip this over, they'll be gone, they'll be ruined. So make sure that if you can do one side at a time, one side one day and one side the next day, or you can do them both at the same time, just make sure that that cabinet doesn't touch anything. All right, we're done with that, man. Enough of the water slide decals. Let's start to, you can stop right here and you've got you a nice brand new looking water cooler or ice cooler. Or you can do what I do and mix a little cinnamon together in some Mod Podge and lay down some base coats of texture. So if you look at pictures of the water cooler or the ice cooler, there's a lot of texture in it. And what I do is I'll go through, you can use aquarium sand, you can use cinnamon, you mix them with some Mod Podge. You can buy a corrosion texture from AK Terrains. It's a little pricey, but you can do pretty much the same thing with the materials that I just told you. The cinnamon and Mod Podge works great. Mix that together and then just sort of imagine in your head, think how this ice cooler being exposed to the moisture and the heat and the blistering sun of being out in front of a convenience store all day, where this would build up rust and where drips and where stains and where things like that would occur. It wouldn't necessarily occur full on over the entire cabinet body. There would be some in the corners and some on the bottoms and some in the corners of the tops. And so that's what I try to do. I try to sort of envision where, you know, and I'll look at references online of where rust or, you know, bubbly paint or texture would naturally build up on something like this. And I'll just look at some references online. Fortunately, I know I've done this a few times. I know, you know, in my mind where it's going to work and where it's not going to look really that realistic. And so different size paintbrushes and sponges here are helpful. I will say that once you're done with this, and maybe even in between while you're doing it, you know, dip your paintbrush in some water and clean it. Otherwise, what'll happen is the Mod Podge will start to dry in the paintbrush and it'll stiffen the brush up, and then you'll just have to throw it out. You know, I mean, they're cheap, but you just have to throw it out at the end. So, and by dipping it in water every so often and cleaning it off and then starting again, it keeps it pliable and it keeps the bristles, you know, able to lay down, you know, the Mod Podge and cinnamon mixture, not just, you know, be stiff. So, and the sponges, what the sponges do is they help you blend and they help you create the random patterns. Yes, those are my, I gotta start wearing shoes when I do these videos. Nobody wants to see my sandals. The sponges help sort of feather out and blend out, creating a random texture with the pores in the sponge and the Mod Podge and cinnamon. It creates a sort of a random pattern of corrosion. It sort of keeps things random, and your eye can't really say, oh, you know what, that looks like a pattern. And so that's kind of what you're after here, and the sponges help you do that. And we'll just continue on doing the rust like this, making sure that, you know, I'm satisfied with the placement of it especially along the bottoms, because, you know, these things sit out and they condensate and they drip and they accumulate rust and stuff on the bottom. You know, you go out there and you hose down the sidewalk and the ice cooler's there and it gets water on it, and, you know, all those sort of realistic things that take their toll on the cabinet. All right, so we've got our base layers of cinnamon and texture down there. We've got a few little bits of, this is one side that I did. We've got some light pigmenting going on. The one side I did in advance so that I could kind of show you, you know, what it looks like, and then I'll flip it over and I'll do the other side of it here and show you as I do it. I start out with a little black. And these are just soft chalk pastels that I grind up and pulverize into a powder using my wife's NutriBullet. I think the NutriBullet is supposed to be used for like spinach and smoothies, but it works great for soft chalk pastels too, man. I'm just saying. Anyway, we'll get a little bit on the brush here, and I'll just sort of work it into the texture. What that cinnamon and Mod Podge does is it creates a tooth, and it allows me to now color the texture that we put down. I'm starting to color the texture, and the pigments will actually stick to the cabinet and to the texture and give it a nice sort of grip. And right here, I just kind of just go off into a little zone, and I start, you know, I don't know how to explain it, but you just sort of disassociate your hand from your mind, and you just kind of go on autopilot, and you just kind of let your hands, you know, do what they want to do here and build this up and discolor it with the colors and the ways, you know, that you want. This is a white cabinet, so I'm just starting from my darks to my lights. Sometimes, you know, you might want to do it different. Here, I want to go, you know, dark black to, you know, brown, then to lighter browns, you know, orange, lighter oranges, and so on. And so we're just going to work this into the cabinet body. Something to keep in mind here too. The reason I put the decals on before I put the water slide decals on before I went and did the texturing and all this is because those don't lay down over the top of texture and pigments and stuff very well. So it's better, in my opinion, to put them on first, then spray seal them again with some spray so that you protect them after they're dry. You protect them in case you brush up against them, because I'm going to be putting pigments over the top of these decals also and sort of weathering the decals as well. Like this right here, I'm going to fade the decals. You know, these decals that sit out in the sun, and so they'd get white and they'd get light spots and sunspots and all that. So I didn't show you, but I took the Mod Podge aerosol and I sprayed this cabinet down again once I put the decals and the stickers on here to seal all those up, because I knew that I was going to be putting like alcohol and stuff on the top of them. So that's going to be an important step to not forget. I should have mentioned that earlier. But anyway, I'm mentioning it now, so that's just what it is. There you go. And we're just using some white pigment here to go inside the lettering and sort of just fade it up a little bit. You can get fancy. You can scratch it. You can, you know, scrape the decals and create torn looking decals. I didn't want to do all that, man. You're going to get a faded decal out of me. That's what you're going to get. You know, and these are just the Vallejo pigments. I do have these pigments also, and I do make my own, you know, pigments because it's just way more cost effective. But I do like the Vallejo pigments. And then I'll wipe off the excess here really lightly with a nice light brush. And then we'll move on to another color. And we'll just build these layers up, man. Starting with a white cabinet, starting with a base layer of texture, then we begin to discolor the texture using our darks to our lights, And that's just really, if you've watched any of my videos on Patreon on rusting and weathering, it's the same process. It's, you know, it's just layer after layer of adding these different colors and different amounts in different places, whatever looks good to your eye, you know. Sometimes I'll rub it in a circular motion here. Sometimes I'll just dust it on and let it drip down with some alcohol to create some stains. There's no real wrong way to do it. I mean, it's rust. I mean, there is a certain look to it that you want to achieve, but, you know. All right. See if we can knock some stuff over. A little isopropyl. And what I'm going to do here, isopropyl is your friend. With pigments, I'm going to spray some in that little painter's dish right there. And I'm going to start to create some cakey, clumpy. We've got the feathery, light, dusty rust. Now I want to create some cakey, clumpy rust. And the way that I do that is I wet the brush in isopropyl, I dip it into the pigment, and I pack it on. I pack it on to the model itself, to the ice cooler. And that gives me another layer of built-up texture that looks really good when you photograph it. And then I just rework it with the isopropyl and the paintbrush. Then I'll blend it with the little sponge. Blend, blend, blend. There you go. That's so awesome. I'm a fool for rust. No, I mean it's a fun process. And the nice thing is it's not a process where like if you're sketching a face or something and you ruin an eye, you're like, dang it, man, I got to start over. This here, there's nothing to really be judged by on it. I mean, nobody's going to say, hey, your eye looks a little crooked. I mean, this is rust. It's weathering. It's, you know, who's to say it doesn't really look like this in real life? You know what I mean? There's nothing to really measure it by. So you can feel pretty confident in knowing that you're going to come out with something good if you just follow the steps. Look at that. Looks so cool. Who knew we'd be growing up to do this stuff? When I was 9 years old, I didn't think about none of this. I just wanted to watch Knight Rider. You know? Who thought that this would even be something I'd be doing? Or you guys, I mean, maybe you knew from a young age. Now, here's where I want to really make sure that you remember to spray seal this again with the Mod Podge aerosol, because you're spraying alcohol onto those water slide decals without a sealer over the top. You definitely run the risk of bleeding the colors. The goal here with the heat gun is not to get it all the way dry. I don't want it to run anymore. So by hitting it with the heat gun, it allows the alcohol to not pool up and run anywhere, so it stops that. But once I see that it's mostly evaporated from the surface, I'm not worried about drying the pigments themselves yet. I don't really care about that. It stops the alcohol from being able to move around on the model, and that's all the heat gun is for right here. And I have my hand there because if it's too hot for my hand, it's definitely going to be too hot for that for the model. And so I kind of use my hand there to make sure that, man, I need to keep my feet out of these videos. I need to start looking more professional. Oh man, one day. So on to the next color of pigment. And this color here is one of the last colors that you use because it's supposed to be like a newer rust color. And I like it for creating little dots and little specks of something for your eye to catch onto in all that dark rust. You can easily overdo this though. I know I said there's no wrong way to do it, but you can overdo it with this. Strike that comment from the record. You can get a little passionate with this one and not realize it. This one here should be like the final color, the final real sparing, you know, bit of contrast against the dark, the overall dark, you know, tone of the model here. I mean, this is new rust, so you wouldn't put it all over the old rust and then cover up all the old rust with it. It would just be something to accent it. You know, does that make sense? I hope so. And just a reminder too, if you're watching this on YouTube and you're not a Patreon member, check out my Patreon. I give you all this kind of stuff. You get props like this, models like this, or, you know, files for free, tutorials, you know, all kinds of cool little bits of information. You know, and I appreciate the people that do support me as paid Patreon members. And if you're buying this file just on my website, insightfulimagery.com, or on Etsy, then I want to take the time to say that I appreciate that too. If you're somebody who doesn't want to do any of this, you just want this ice cooler. You're like, I don't want to do all that. I just want to get it out of the box and take a picture with it. Then, you know, I appreciate that too. You can buy this complete painted prop on my Etsy and my website as well, insightfulimagery.com. And I definitely appreciate those people. And know that when you buy this prop, this is exactly what I'm doing for your prop. It's the same process. And so, you know, it's either way that you support me, I appreciate it. Even if it's just watching the video, that supports me. So I really appreciate those people. And if you don't follow me on Instagram, it's insightful_imagery. And I'm on TikTok and Facebook and here on YouTube. All right, look at this. I want to start bringing, see how helpful that sponge is? It allows me to sort of feather and create those random patterns. And then if you use something a little more abrasive, or you give it a little bit of a slight twist with the sponge, then you can start to show some of the white of the cabinet back through the color, and it looks like it's chipped down a little bit too. That's a different technique. Chipping is a different technique, though. If you want to see that, that's on my Patreon also. There's hairspray chipping, and then there's, you know, actual chipping medium that you can buy and use with your airbrush. Chipping's fun too. I didn't really need any chipping on this though, because these cabinets are usually painted multiple colors. A little bit more alcohol. Isopropyl alcohol definitely is one of those tools you have to have if you're doing pigments. There's no need in buying the pigment. There's a thinner fluid, a solution that they sell for the pigments, but it's basically just alcohol. Save your money. And I realized that one day because I had bought some and I left some set out for a couple hours and it evaporated. I'm like, huh, that's weird. Didn't smell like alcohol, but it must have been because it evaporated pretty quick. So I'm like, well, let me try this with alcohol, and bam. Never went back. Saved my money so I could waste it on something else. Look at this, though. Isn't this exciting when you start from just this white model plain cabinet? Actually, you start just from an imagination, from a reference on the internet. You know, you get in the computer and you model this and you measure and you make the components and you export them and you slice them and you print them and all the way up to this point, man, you know, this thing has become real. It started off, you know, inside as an idea, and now it's here in the real world. So here I have just a little wire brush, it's actually a wire wheel attachment from my Dremel, and I just go ahead and just kind of scrape through a little bit of that texture and show a little bit of the white beneath it. What it does is it just gives the eye something to grab onto. Just breaks up some of the dark, the overall dark, you know, feel of the weathering. It gives a little bit of something for your eye to catch onto there. Just kind of scrape through, twist through, poke through, scratch through. Just create some random scratches and scuffs. That's all. But don't touch those water decals. Do not touch them. When you're done with this, you can spray it with the Mod Podge aerosol again. Definitely do that. And you can even go so far after that as to lightly brush on the actual Mod Podge that comes in the jar. But I will say that first, make sure that you spray it with an aerosol sealer. It doesn't have to be Mod Podge, but I like the Mod Podge one. Because if you go directly to putting a light coat of the liquid Mod Podge on here, what's going to happen is you're going to drag those pigments and you're going to make a muddy mess. So spray it first. Spray it thoroughly first, let it dry, then add your little coats of Mod Podge. You can brush it on so that you don't get any flaking or staining, or when you pick it up, you don't get any pigments on your hands. But man, that's the model, man. That's how I put it together. That's how I do it every time. I hope you like it. We're going to check out some pictures here with it and let you see. Look, I mean, I think it looks pretty good, man. Anyway, if you like this kind of thing, and I think you probably do because you've been watching the video the whole time, then follow me on the social media platforms, become a Patreon member, hit me up on all the different social media places, and I really appreciate everybody watching, and like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. That helps me out. Share me with a friend. Take care.